Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord developer blog video. Funnily enough, yesterday I posted a video covering sort of dynasty management, if you will. Basically, like how the whole family dynamic in the game is going to work and sort of what you can do with it in terms of, gaining power and controlling certain things. And the day that the video posted, which was yesterday, they put up a developer blog video about kingdom management. So not quite the same thing, but very closely related. And so yesterday we talked about managing your your clan. Today we're going to be talking about managing your kingdom. So let's dive on in. Some very interesting information in this one, and some things confirmed for me that I was really excited to hear about. Alright then. When you set out on your adventures in Mount & Blade games, you are just a humble traveler with only a sword and a horse to your name. As you progress through the game and establish a foothold in Calradia, you can pledge your sword to a faction and be welcomed into the fold of the nobility. Eventually, you will have the option of branching out and establishing your own kingdom, or as the case is in Bannerlord, or with Bannerlord, if you have taken a liking to your current one, you can subvert it and seize power for yourself. Now, they don't really mention that any further in this blog post, but I took that as confirmation that you can become the king, or, the ruler, I guess I should say, the ruler of an existing faction. That's what that sounds like to me. And they don't explicitly state it again anywhere else, but that's exactly what they're implying there, which is great news, especially for the Empire. For the Empire specifically, I wanted to be able to become emperor from within. For the rest of the factions, I didn't care as much because, for like the Volandians, for example, what difference does it really make if you conquer it from within or without? It's definitely a cool option to have, but the Empire is kind of a special case because that's, the established Empire of Calradia. And so it's not quite the same if you conquer it and form something new. But, with the other kingdoms, to me at least it didn't matter as much. But it's great that that's going to be a thing, or at least it sounds like it's going to be a thing. And I really hope it does apply to every faction, because that's such a cool mechanic to have, to be able to kind of Game of Thrones your way to the top from within. And it adds a whole new dynamic to the game too, because now you can get to that top spot without just being a straight conqueror. You could potentially do it through maneuvering, and that's entirely new to Mount & Blade. That's not really something that even existed in the older games. Alright, so in this week's blog we discuss how players can interact with their fellow nobles after joining or establishing their own kingdom, looking specifically at the kingdom screen, which is an entirely new addition to the Mount & Blade series. The main focus of Mount & Blade games revolves around the aforementioned journey from rags to riches. Almost every action you take in the game is done in the effort of increasing your wealth, prestige, and ultimately your power. However, in our previous games, there are parts of this journey which were somewhat overlooked during development. In our previous games, managing and interacting with the lords of your realm is an arduous task that requires some level of patience. Yeah, it's pretty tedious because there's no way to really do it other than to go around and talk to every single individual one. The information presented to the player can be hard to locate because it's all over the place, and the kinds of interactions available are rather limited in scope. Yeah, I mean, you basically just had dialogue options. Obviously, the diplomacy mod added quite a bit to that, but it was, even with the diplomacy mod, it was really just a shadow of what it could have been. And they definitely did make significant improvements in that mod. I'm not trying to take away from what they did, because that was night and day better than what was in the base game. But they were obviously hindered by what the game could do. And so I'm very excited to see them not only incorporating those ideas into Bannerlord, but going beyond that. So this is something we wanted to address for Bannerlord, making the mid to late game a more fluid and enjoyable experience for players. And that's great, because so often you become king and then it just becomes a grind from there. We saw that in my Kingdom mod Let's Play, where once we had sort of established ourselves as a kingdom and a force to be reckoned with, it was basically just one conquest after another, and it got very stale because there was really nothing to do. I just took on all the honorable lords. If they were dishonorable, I didn't give them any land. They fought for me for a little bit, and then they went off and, you know, joined another faction. And it became very kind of cookie cutter, copy and paste, just do the same thing over and over again until the whole map was ours. Or we never even got around to finishing it because I was losing interest. A lot of the viewership was falling off because, again, it was a bit repetitive. And so I'm excited that there's going to be a lot more to do there, or at least more interesting things to do. Because once you hit that point, it just becomes, you know, snowballing downhill. And it'd be nice for you to have some more challenges. And not just from without, but from within as well. So our solution was to implement a screen dedicated entirely to this aspect of the game, along with some additional mechanics to explore upon the existing interactions available, of course. The kingdom screen is split into 4 separate tabs: clans, fiefs, policies, and armies. These tabs cover practically every piece of information that the player needs to make informed decisions and manage their kingdom effectively. The screen is still a work in progress, and new elements are still being added. However, what we are showing you in this week's blog is something close to what you can expect from the final game. And I don't think anybody was able to see this in the demo either, so this is all new stuff that we're seeing here. I've also got these set up on other tabs, so we'll be able to look at them more closely. I made sure it worked in OBS and everything, so no worries there. So first we have clans. The clans tab, hopefully you guys can see this with my overlay. The clans tab shows detailed information about every clan that is a member of the faction. This information includes the clan name, banner, influence, members, and fiefs. In this screen, you can lend your support for one of the clans to become the leader of the faction, or initiate a vote to have a clan expelled from the kingdom. So that's really cool. Let's take a look at that screen in a little bit more detail. But I am so excited about the different clan politics that can happen in this game now, because it's not just a matter of like, okay, King Harlos is, you know, the king of the Swadians, and he's always going to be the king of the Swadians until the Swadians are defeated. Or if you decide to, you know, side with the Pretender and take over the Swadians in her name, right? Yeah. In her name, then, you know, she would be queen of the Swadians, but it was either him or her, and that was it. Now we have these clans that can kind of jostle and maneuver for power within the kingdoms, and then you can come in and start your own clan and jostle for position and maybe take that top spot. And I just love how fluid the game is shaping up to be, where in these aspects in Bannerlord they were so rigid. That was set in stone. Obviously the lords would come and go because, you know, they're all dishonorable, and even the honorable ones would end up at odds with people, and you know, they were playing musical chairs in terms of, you know, positions in kingdoms, but the kings were set unless you intervened on behalf of a pretender. And then it was just one of 2 options. But now, no. Clans can, you know, move up and down. You can actually support a clan that's not your own, which is kind of cool. So if you want to maybe gain some standing within the kingdom early on, you could back maybe the second most powerful house and try to help them overcome the most powerful house, and then, you know, through that you'll gain relation with them, and that will improve your standing, and you can use that to kind of parlay into maybe pushing yourself into that top spot later. And maybe in that later position, when, you know, you're kind of 1 and 2 with the people you helped earlier, you could, you know, try to use your influence to get them kicked out and allow you to take that top spot. So some really cool options there just with the clans themselves. And we can see that here. So there's the support option. It looks like it costs 20 influence. The expel option costs 30. We can see all the different clans here. It looks like this one has by far the most members, and that definitely is showing in their influence too. They are 3 times as influential as the next highest, which is quite a lot. And then everybody else is very low. It looks like, I wonder if there's another one up there that we can't see. We can also see the fiefs here as well. I believe this one is a village. This is the castle, and I think that's the town. So those are the different 3 types of fiefs. I could be wrong on those, but I'm fairly certain that's what it is. And so, honestly, there's probably a better way to represent this. I don't really love these pictures. Maybe something more simple as just part of the UI element that's very clearly a village, a town, and a castle. But at least we can see it all in one place. Even if, you know, it might take some getting used to what these different pictures are. So back over here, the next tab is the Fiefs tab, which will give us even more information on that. So the Fiefs tab shows the towns, castles, and villages which are under the control of the faction. There is also an option in this tab which lets you spend a large sum of influence to try and retract a fief from another lord. That's really cool, because there's been so many times in so many different campaigns where I've given a fief to a particular lord and I ended up regretting it, either because I would have rather maybe given that lord a bunch of, you know, fiefs in one particular area and he ends up kind of scattered all over. Because I always like to localize people, that way they don't have to run across the map to check on their various fiefs, because that's really all they do when they're not in your campaigns, is they just run around between their, you know, holdings. And so if you could give them holdings all in one area, they tend to stay there and defend that area better. But it can be very hard to plan that out when you're, you know, planning a continent-wide conquest. And so having the ability to retract something and then giving it to somebody else, and, you know, obviously that person's going to hate you, but maybe you can make up for it by giving them something else in a different area. So let's take a look at that one. Actually, I didn't finish reading that, did I? Yeah, so however, this is still subject to a vote from the other lords, and the person on the receiving end of this action may not be too pleased with your meddling. So yeah, you're going to have to maneuver yourself into a position to push this through, and it looks like, I'll get more into the cost of it when we look at the actual screen. If the vote is successful, then a second vote will begin to decide who will take control of that fief. I actually don't like that part so much. If you're the one spending the influence and making it happen, I feel like, especially since I believe only the leader of the faction can do this. So this is assuming you're the king, allowing you to do this. Actually, maybe not. I don't know. It doesn't quite say, but I would assume only the faction leader could do this. No, actually, I'm starting to doubt that now, because obviously the player here isn't the faction leader. So it looks like anybody can do this with enough influence. But as the faction leader, I would prefer a more like Crusader Kings type method, where if you are like revoking that fief, it should go to you and then you can assign it as you choose. Now, I understand with somebody who's not the faction leader, it kind of makes more sense for it to be up in the air. But even then, I feel like if you're making this happen, you should probably be the one it ends up with, and you can decide where it goes from there. But it's still a cool option, even if it seems very impractical. So let's look at the screen a little bit better, and we can see that it's 200 influence to annex. And that seems like the wrong word for it, because, again, it's 2 votes, and so chances are it's probably not going to end up with you. But it's possible. I think I would have preferred it if this was something that only the faction leader could do, and it was like revoke or something like that, and so they would vote on it and then it would just go to the faction leader. If it's an annexation, then obviously everybody should be able to do it, but I still think whoever put this through should be the one that inevitably ends up with it, because that's a lot of influence to spend, and you still have to make the first vote successful, and then obviously the chances of getting a second vote to go through is, or in your favor, is, you know, pretty slim. But we can see all the different fiefs here, and I assume, well, you can sort them by whatever category you want, but by default they're probably sorted by type. And we can see which clan they belong to, who the actual owner is within that clan, any associated villages for the larger ones. So they've gone away from the more open-ended fief system. We talked about this in a previous developer blog. So villages can't become castles or towns anymore, which I was really excited for, but unfortunately they felt it was too complicated. So they're back to the old system. Villages are attached to castles or towns, and so we can see that here. This castle has 2 associated villages. Some of them only have 1. I'm sure some of the towns might have as many as 3. We can see the prosperity, the food, what the current garrison is. I'm curious to see if they'll allow us to garrison villages. I'm willing to bet probably not, but that would be a nice addition. Some warband mods have done that, and I don't mind it. It is kind of a pain, but it's better than having to constantly run back and forth to defend your villages, which I usually just end up ignoring. And then militia, which is interesting. I don't really know much about that, so we'll have to wait and see if they ever tell us more, but that is an intriguing little thing there. None of these have any militia. I'm wondering if the towns do. And maybe that's the town's version of a garrison. They just have some villagers that are able to fight, whereas, you know, the castles are just manned by whoever you put there, and then maybe the town is a little bit of both. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So moving on, we have the policy screen. So the policies tab allows players to propose new policies or initiate a vote to repeal existing ones. Policies affect the entire kingdom and range from laws which give greater protections to vassals or transfer more power to the ruler. God, I'm getting more and more Crusader Kings 2 vibes from this. Everything we hear is, it's getting very Crusader Kingsy, which I don't mind at all. I absolutely love Crusader Kings 2. I know many of you do as well. And this seems like it's taken straight out of there. So instead of like crown authority laws where, you know, just passing various policies, it looks like this one is property protections. So I don't think we need to zoom in here. I think you guys can see it just fine as is. But we can see that there's patriotism, Charter of Liberties, Privy Council, scutage tax, magistrates, Senate, Council of Commons, and we can see that there is a scroll bar here. So there's a few up here that we can't see. The one we're looking at right now, those property protections, and so it says even the king cannot take land without process of law. I wonder if that could override what we saw here, because that would imply that without this law, without property protections, the king could take land without process of law. Interesting implications there. We'll have to see. But some of these are cool. So if you wanted to, you could instill like a charter of liberties, set up a senate, and move your kingdom away from being like a monarchy or a dictatorship, and you could actually, I don't know how much of a republic you can make it, but you could definitely point it in that direction through the Senate. And so that would be kind of cool if you could, you know, maybe reconquer the empire and then turn it into a republic and do like a reverse Rome type thing. That would be a very fun campaign to try. Obviously, it would be difficult because the less authority you sort of sequester as the player, the more the AI can get in your way. But I guess that would be part of the fun, right? And so I'm not going to, again, zoom in on this because I think we've seen everything there is to be seen there. Let's move on to the army screen. We will take a closer look at this one just because there's some small text there that you can't quite see otherwise. So finally, we have the armies tab. This tab lets you create and manage different armies within your faction. The screen gives you a detailed breakdown of each army, including the lords that comprise the army, the strength and cohesion of the army, and the army's current objective. Faction leaders are able to assign objectives to the armies through this tab, giving players greater control over the strategic aspects of warfare in the game. So it's worth mentioning here that armies are basically what campaigns were in Warband. So don't confuse army with party. Parties are individual, for lack of a better word, armies of, you know, an individual lord. But an army in Bannerlord is a collection of those lords' parties that fight together. And so in order to create those, you have to spend influence. Let's actually look at that screen. Oh, wrong one. There we go. So yeah, it costs influence to create these, and it costs influence to maintain them. So you're going to need to be very influential to do this. Obviously, the faction leader or somebody very powerful like a marshal would be leading these. And so we can see that in the case of the Khuzaits here, they've got two armies going. And we can see who the leader is, one of which is the faction leader, and this guy's probably one of the more influential lords. We can see how many strong the army is. And I'm surprised at how small these are, given we can see that there's quite a few lords involved in each of these. It's difficult to see exactly how many portraits there is, because I can't tell if it looks like 5, but it could be 6. And then here, that looks like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7. So on average, that's not that many men per party. It's like, well, in this case, it's a little over 50. Here, it's a little bit better, but still not very large armies. And hopefully we see that change, because one thing that they were touting about Bannerlord was the fact that you could have battles that were significantly larger than in Warband, and they would perform better and look better. I think they were saying something like double the size. So in Warband, I think 150 was the 150 per side was the best you could do without mods. Mods, obviously, you could, you know, kind of break that and go larger or as large as you wanted, assuming your computer could handle it. But, you know, generally the game engine crapped out before your computer did. But here they were saying like 300 versus 300, and I'm expecting Warband like party sizes where, you know, King might have an army of 300 on his own, and then each Lord would have, you know, somewhere between 50 and 200. And I was thinking maybe even larger than that, because again, the battle sizes can be bigger, but it looks like they're going to be smaller if this is any indication. So anyways, we have some options here. We can see that you can disband or change leader of these parties. And you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, you know, it's not worth talking about. Anyways, we can see that they can also create a new army here. And I'm sort of getting like shades of Hearts of Iron almost, where, you know, you can have armies on like an Eastern Front army and a Western Front army type thing. And that's really cool, because if you're involved in multiple wars, in Warband, it's very difficult to deal with that sort of situation, because really the only way to wage effective war in Warband is to lead the campaign yourself, or to put a lord in charge as marshal that's got very high relation with you and give him, you know, very specific objectives and manage it that way. And even that's kind of difficult. But here what we can do now is, if you're the king, you could set up multiple parties, and depending on how powerful your kingdom is, you might have a lot of lords at your disposal, and you can have, you know, 2 of them waging offensive wars and then 1 kind of hanging back defending your territory, or, you know, maybe even 2, 1 defending each front and then 1 attacking on each front. And so there's a lot of options. This adds a ton of strategic depth to the game, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So cannot wait to mess around with this. I think it is going to make being a king a lot more fun, because you're not going to have to do everything yourself now. Probably still going to have to do a lot, but not nearly as much as you had to before. Now there's, you know, more things for you to do that are interesting, that don't require you to be directly involved in every single thing that's happening. All right, and so let's get back over here. We have one more screen. This is individual army management, so let's take a peek at that. Here we can see, like, this is, I guess, the army. I think these are how far away people are. No. So I think, like, what's happening here? Is this the player character, maybe? Because I think this is like their influence cost. So to keep Saran in the army for 1 day, it costs 5 influence. So you're spending 5 influence a day to keep him around. Oh no, that's, what, 1 day? That's how far he is. Where are you? No, I guess that's how far away they are. Yeah, okay. So 5 influence to get him in the party. He's 1 day away. These guys are all 1 day away. Or at least I assume, because he 1 day, but these guys aren't visible on here, so we don't know. But yeah, that's the only time given here, so I'm assuming it's the same there. And then we can see how strong their party is right here, and up there as well. And yeah, these are fairly small parties. I'm surprised by that. Maybe it's just because they're early in the game or something, and everybody kind of has to level up. But I'm definitely surprised. Like, you would think 4 lords would do a little bit better than 285 men, but That's what we're looking at right now. And so that's really all there is to see there. And so overall, we think that the Kingdom screen is a welcome new addition and helps to enhance the mid to late game experience for players. Information is presented in a much more streamlined and aesthetically pleasing way, and the new additions of clans, policies, and armies all come together to give a more accurate representation of an actual medieval kingdom, especially when it comes to internal power struggles. Yes, everything about this is fantastic. There's a few minor nitpicks I have where it's not that I disagree with what they did, it's just that I think taking it in a slightly different direction would have been better. But overall, these are all improvements, and I cannot wait to get my hands on them. If you haven't been following all this stuff, they're going less character-centric, I guess I could say. And so there is permadeath in the game now, or at least that's the plan. And so your character is one of many characters that you'll potentially have, although you can turn that off if you want to just focus on one character. So you can play the old-fashioned warband way. But the way that they intend for you to play now is you play as you start out your character, you build a clan around them, that character dies, you take over playing as the heir. And so I think we're going to see much more long-term campaigns where in warband everything sort of happens within a couple of years, if even that. Because time passes so slow in Warband. In Bannerlord, you're going to be seeing, I don't know if you'll have like several generations necessarily, but you're going to be definitely seeing a change in landscape from the start of your campaign to the end of it. And all of these things just add more depth to that. And even without that whole generational mechanic, this adds so much more strategic depth that it's all just going to be so much more entertaining, I feel like, and give you a reason to want to, be a king other than, just to say I conquered the whole map. Because now you're going to have all these cool things that you can do as the faction leader, where before you couldn't. So I think that's it for today. Hopefully they keep it up with these informative blog posts. I did skip the last one because it was just an interview, but so far the non-interview blog posts recently have been, pretty substantial, and so I'm glad about that. I'm done covering that forum post that we had looked at in the last couple of videos. So outside of news released elsewhere or developer blogs, we probably won't be doing a ton of Bannerlord videos. But yeah, at least we're getting some like real solid information out of them finally. And about single player, no less, which I think is what a lot of people wanted.